Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited today to be joined by managing editor of The Fine Print, Kimberly Soenen. The Fine Print is a global health magazine examining the systems, individuals, and processes that improve or impose harm to health. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Love the cast.
Now, we kind of linked up because I made a Instagram reel complaining about the corporate-owned housing that's going up in my neighborhood. Is that how you found my reel?
I found that reel. I've been following you for a bit of time, but that one really hooked me. And there were a lot of correlations. There are a lot of correlations between what's happening in the rental market, and the owner market, the housing market, and what's happened to healthcare over the last 20 years. So I really hooked into that. And that's, even though I'd been surfing you for quite a while, when you were in more pop culture mode, I really hooked into that and thought I'd just send you a ping. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, just to give you the full disclosure, I'm 39. I just bought my first home, moved from California to Tennessee. Everyone says, oh, you're raising the prices in housing. And I say, tough cookies. I haven't been able to buy a home for 20 years. I've been chasing the wave like everyone else. And I'm lucky. My channel's pretty successful. Like I had to hit every green light for the last 3 years in order to buy a home. Right. So it just seems like such a problem. And likewise, we just had a baby. We don't even know what the baby cost yet as far as healthcare is concerned. So I think if we can figure out as a country healthcare and living in being able to afford your own home, I think we're going to solve a lot of issues out there.
Yeah, well, those are the, you touch on a couple of really interesting points and you articulate them really well as a young parent, or a new parent, I should say. So could be younger, but here we are. No, I'm all for wisdom. I'm all for age. I'm all for earning the years and earning the badges and stripes. So I never dig at age. So one of the things that you've hit on that's really important, as you said right away, I've rung all the bells. I've done everything right. I work hard, and I'm lucky. You threw in that word. I'm lucky. You don't have a disability. You don't have an illness, an injury. You're not terminally. You don't have a chronic illness that your listeners are aware of, at least. And so people feel that, the reason that housing post struck a chord with me is that there's a direct correlation to what happened to healthcare. And about 40 years ago, healthcare and public health infrastructure was corporatized, and Congress allowed it. The Federal Trade Commission allowed it. And what does that mean? It means HMOs, PPOs, networks, denial of care as a business model, and really operating healthcare as investment banking firms and private equity firms. And so with housing right now, when you posted that, I think you're walking down the street with August and kind of you feel like you found a relatively affordable place to live. You're a new family. You're trying to figure out how to project costs and expenses. You have this new kind of asteroid in your home and you don't know what to expect. And that's when things go well. It's hard to have children, or it's financially challenging to have children when things are going well. So with corporate housing, what's happening is these corporations are buying up entire neighborhoods, and then they own the lion's share of the market, and they kind of present it just like the healthcare managed care industry did, or the managed care lobby, commercial health insurance lobby did in the 80s. They're presenting it as if this is going to stabilize and lower costs. So they're presenting it as if we own all these houses, we have the power to lower costs and stabilize costs. But we know that's actually not the case already, that because they have so much consolidated power and wealth, these houses are becoming unaffordable. And so the argument is exactly the same as commercial health insurance made in the 80s. And they're different industries, but it's the same hustle.
Yeah, and it seems like both industries are playing with people's lives. Like capitalism, the benefits always like let the free market decide what's successful, what's not. And if your business doesn't work, you go bankrupt. But in healthcare, it's like if your business doesn't work, you die. If you can't afford a home, you're homeless. So the stakes are so much higher. And a lot of people in the comment section would say things like those would feel like corporate talking points, which are like, well, these homes wouldn't have been built if it wasn't for the private equity. And it's like, well, then how come the government can't help get loans out so that, or like, what can we all do to make it easier to get people's foot in the door? Because people like me spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent, and we weren't even approved to own a home because I guess the numbers didn't line up. And I just think there should be an easier way. And actually, and I don't know if this is related at all, but my credit score was above 800 my whole life. And then something happened 6 months before I went to go buy a home that tanked it by 150 points. That was really out of my control.
Right.
And it was just like, man, you hate to relate something to, the big S word, slavery, because times are a lot better, but it feels like you're always attached to some indentured servitude.
Yeah. All of these points. So the old adage of, without a home, the foundational cornerstones of health, which are having a home and having some sort of access to income, a livelihood, a craft, a profession, an ability to pull income into your individual household or your family household. And so when we look at those cornerstones of employment and housing, employment and health, the old adage is then you can build your own home. And that's a very basic way of saying the foundational cornerstones of public health are shelter, housing, and lifelong healthcare maintenance. And right now in the United States, the housing crisis or the lack of housing, let me rephrase that, the unaffordable housing crisis and the unaffordable healthcare crisis have now converged. And that has formed combustion because the commercial health insurance industry in the United States is based on denial of care. They use PXCX algorithms and AI to deny care. They use something called NH Predict, which is also software to deny care and deny claims at a rate of, you're looking at 550 to 100 denials per 1.2 seconds. So that's the business model. And when you look at housing, and the consolidation of wealth and power in housing by these corporations. And some aren't even based in the United States. I think there's a company right now in Toronto that's doing a lot with corporate housing in the United States. But that consolidation of wealth and power does not lower costs. It does not make things more affordable. Pharma, housing, and healthcare. Once you have that consolidation of wealth and power, we've seen how it raises costs. So in the pharmaceutical industry, the reason they have patents and they don't want smaller labs and R&D labs at universities creating medicines that are effective, and the reason they hold patents is to stop competition. In corporate housing, the reason the lion's share of the housing market is owned by corporations in some parts of the United States is because they have this consolidation of wealth and power actually disallows contractors and smaller businesses that are local from entering that market because they monopolize it. And likewise in healthcare across the country, it's the same playbook. Consolidation of wealth and power keeps smaller entities out. And we've seen how using those three examples, pharmaceuticals, the pharmaceutical industry and lobby, the commercial health insurance industry and lobby, and housing, corporate housing, the playbook is exactly the same. And now that private equity has a piece of that pie, it's really torch and burn economics. And people are pushing back. The good news is they're kind of rising up, they're pushing back, they're talking to their state legislatures, they're talking to their governors, their mayors, and they're saying it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable to make healthcare out of touch or out of reach and housing out of reach. And it also, Dave, I tell you, like the one of the things that is really tragic about all this is that when you work hard, you try and do everything right. You try and play by the rules, as people say. And then 6 months before you buy a house, you find out something on your credit score disqualified you from getting the house you and your wife wanted. And so these fissures really sting people. They feel a distrust and they feel slighted. And those fissures, those emotional fissures and those that distrust really impacts communities and really impacts society. And so that's kind of the byproduct that a lot of people don't talk about is that Americans are thinking, God, we're working really hard, we're doing the right thing, and we're still getting screwed.
Yeah, and you know what? This is what's the big problem that I'm seeing is that we're not even all on the same page here. And I always said this: if we're not going to get united when they find an alien existed, if we're not going to get united when there's a foreign war, like if we're not going to get united that we're all getting robbed as essentially the middle class here. And so that when I made that reel, it was my way of saying it's not California that's really messing up Montana. It's not Newsom that's messing up Mississippi. It's like if we can't even at least admit that I don't even know if it's a Democrat or Republic problem, or if they're both in the pocket of lobbying groups. It seems like at the very least, if we could take money out of politics, we could get to a sensible policy that would help people. Like, what's the solution that people can do? Is it? And I ask this because I live in a red state now, so like I'm learning the new set of politics, but it seems to me like the problem is somebody sold this land to this corporate people and no one really follows the money on this small level. Like we don't have local newspapers anymore that really look into these things. So like, what are we supposed to be doing?
Well, that's bait and switch I'm speaking of. The bait and switch in managed care was privatization of public health infrastructure, taxpayer dollars being approved by Congress to go into the coffers of private entities. With corporate housing, if you do a deep dive on some of the land that you've been talking about in your casts recently about corporate housing in your neighborhood, if you do a deep dive on that property, that's most likely taxpayer financed property, and it was handed over to private entities in the name of development. So taxpayer financed, a lot of Americans call that free healthcare, free roads, free libraries, free stoplights, you name it, free public schools, but it's taxpayer finance. So I try and use that language as much as I can, taxpayer financed, and it speaks to what we value. And if Americans value access to healthcare as a moral, ethical, economic, social, value to which we should assign fiscal priority, then and only then can we move forward with this universal healthcare concept. But everybody needs healthcare. Everybody needs healthcare. You just had a new baby. You're going to bring that baby to the primary care doctor, 4 times in the first year, if he's healthy.
Oh, we've been 5 times already.
5 times already. And how old is he?
He's 13 weeks.
He's 13 weeks. And so you send something off as a new parent and you think, I think we should just go, or he's got a fever or an earache or something. And so this notion of lifelong healthcare maintenance, the need for it is really, what we're aspiring to in the single payer national health program movement and the universal healthcare movement is to take the red and blue and green and pink and independent and Republican and Democratic politics out of healthcare. You do that a lot in your podcast. You make the case that certain things happen across red, blue, conservative. They happen to people across the spectrum. Everybody needs housing. Everybody needs healthcare. Those two things are pretty non-debatable, right? I mean,
most people, when it's broken down, agree on it. They just, I think a lot of people are led by fear. Like, I don't want my taxes to go up. But like you said, taxpayer funded probably sounds a little better than socialized healthcare, even though that's what it is.
Yeah, and right now,
these words.
Yeah, and right now, the Senate Bill 1655 is the National Improved Medicare for All Act. And so that would afford dental, vision, prenatal, all the way to end of life, hearing, sexual and reproductive health. It's universal health care. So that bill has been on the Hill since 2023. It's actually been on the Hill since 2003 under a different number. But that bill is National Improved Medicare for All. It would be enacted within 4 years fully across the country. And that means everybody would have health care access from cradle, actually prenatal to end of life. And people can do a deeper dive on S1655, the bill themselves, to see how it's financed. I don't really want to go into the weeds on that with you, but what we're trying to kind of make the case for across, from Nashville to New York to rural Kentucky to rural Michigan to Northern California and everywhere in between, is that everybody needs healthcare, and S1655 is enacting 1655 is one way to do it. But you did mention our lobbyist model prevents that from happening. Kamala Harris did endorse 1655 a few years ago, and then she did a U-turn. She did a flip-flop because of her donors, who are her donors: corporate healthcare, commercial health insurance industry donors. So we're seeing too, even with a candidate like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, neither one of them will commit to single payer full bore because they have people financing their campaigns who are part of the privatized medicine managed care industry.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. So when National Nurses United just endorsed Kamala Harris, but they specifically don't use the language single payer or S1655. They endorse her, but they don't advocate for changing our lobbyist system. They don't specifically say 1655. You won't hear their term universal health care, because they know she's tethered to lobbyists and campaign finance donors who have a conflict of interest with universal health care. Why? Because it would take return on investment away from their stakeholders and shareholders. So people right now are out there, they're profiting off of illness, injury, disability, and death. For friends that you know, friends that I know, red, blue, purple states, they are profiting. If you just spin your neck around and look to your neighbors.
I've got no sort of pride or affiliation to a political party to the extent that I want, I want what's best for everybody. And we've seen lobby groups in the past, slander countries that have Medicare for all, saying, oh, you're going to wait 7 years to get a knee replaced. I'm seeing people on the streets that are dying. Like I've seen it in LA. I'm seeing it here in Nashville. People that don't get that thing checked out. I have family that, own small businesses, and they're burdened by all these high costs of providing their employees health insurance. And they're still voting against universal health care, even when they have insurance that's supposed to be good, and it doesn't cover the thing that they need it to. And that's a $200,000 bill. And then they have to fight with insurance companies' lawyers over who's going to pay it. The saddest part about going into some of these classes we went into before the baby came was we went to the hospital and they had a class, so like an orientation. And the main question everyone was asking was, how can I ensure that my anesthesiologist will be in the same network as my doctor? How bogus are these lines of questions that we have to ask when we're not even and I get that in the short term, that's what people need to ask, but wouldn't it just be better if we all just knew the costs of things and it was all pre-figured out? How do we sell that to the greater good of, people that are afraid and say, I love my private insurance? Like, how do we sell them on the idea that this is a cheaper option if we all collectively pay into one system? Sure.
Well, if Americans collectively pay into one system and we do enact Senate Bill 1655 or National Improved Medicare for All, one of the cases for enacting that or one of the arguments that we can make to people who believe that their taxes are going to increase if universal health care was implemented is that Americans are also already paying what we call a health tax. So what are you and your wife paying for? What are citizens paying for right now? They're paying for childcare, SNAP benefits, which are food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, the VA. Do you want me to go on? There's about 14 more programs that are taxpayer financed health programs in the United States.
And so we're already in the system. We're just not paying the level that helps us all.
You're not just paying premiums, deductibles, lab fees, office fees, out-of-pocket costs. You are above and beyond that paying for Medicare, Medicaid, VA, SHIPS, which is the SHIP is a child healthcare benefit. And so there are so many government or taxpayer financed health programs, and they all kind of dovetail into each other. So on top of that, all of those combined are what we call the health tax that you guys are that citizens are paying. And a lot of them just aren't aware that they're paying for those programs. And on top of that, you're paying your premium. On top for commercial health insurance. On top of that, you're paying your deductible. On top of that, you're paying office fees, sometimes lab fees, formulary out of formulary prescription bill cost. So all of these costs add up, and some of those costs are paid before you even access healthcare. So your premiums, deductibles, all of those fees, that's before you even actually go to see a doctor. That's before you go to get the surgery. That's before. So you're paying into a system and you're not always getting anything out of it. So for conservative governors right now in Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, Florida, they're looking at the numbers right now and saying, wow, expanding Medicaid makes sense. Expanding single payer programs makes sense to us fiscally. They're not doing it based on moral or ethical reasons. They're doing it based on economic reasons. And we're seeing a trend towards that right now, where governors in very, very red states are saying, wait a minute, our premiums are going up for my voters, my citizens, 13%, 22%. And I'm looking at commercial health insurance profits, and your profits are record breaking, and you're still augmenting the premiums for my citizens. This isn't making sense to me. And I'm a conservative governor who does the math. And so that impetus is really turning the heads of a lot of CEOs, CFOs, and conservative governors, including Boeing. United Auto Workers just endorsed Kamala. I mean, so they're looking at the numbers and the numbers alone and saying, wow, this would be really cost effective because we're going to pull all the grifters, the middlemen out of our process administratively, and people will just be able to go for healthcare. And so that's a really strong economic argument to make with small businesses, contractors, freelancers, comedic artists. Hollywood, the industry. We just saw for the first time someone won an Oscar last year, I think, and he was the first one to say publicly, look, I had a gap in my insurance and it was really scary. And a lot of us, even when you win an Oscar, you have a gap in your commercial health insurance, and we can go months and months and months without unless we meet a $22,000 mark with.
Right. I haven't qualified for my Screen Actors Guild insurance in 14 years.
And think of that. Let's just stop right there. Think of that. How Americans talk about insurance. You just said qualified for healthcare.
Yeah.
So that is a very, very common thing. Just the language Americans throw around the healthcare kind of conversation. Did I meet my deductible? Did I qualify for insurance? Did I earn enough to get healthcare?
And it feels
to have health.
It feels very Stockholm syndrome, the way some people describe their job. I love my job so much. They provide me, and it's like, I want jobs to sell people on working for them because it pays enough money, not because they dangle what should be human rights. So we see the same thing, like, we see it with the government will dangle, like, you'll get free college if you join the military. It's like, all right, I just think we're not selling people on the dream that we really should.
Let's even back that up. Let's back up further. The way in which we have this conversation, because we're gonna be hearing all the recycled rhetoric in the next 90 days. We were 100 days out from the election a week ago. So we're 80, 90 days out from the presidential election. We're going to just see that rhetoric, the recycled rhetoric and talking points about losing my health care, losing my choice, losing my freedom, government run, et cetera. We're just going to hear all of those buzzwords in the next 80 days. And that's why I wanted to talk to you at this juncture, because we're going to hear those recycled talking points that we've heard for 40 years. But since then, things have gotten worse. Medical debt has increased. We're in the trillions, medical debt-wise. GoFundMe, the lion's share of GoFundMe is...
Well, I've been talking about this on stage. In fact, I just did a show in front of a very conservative audience. And I mentioned, are we okay that Mary Lou Retton needed a GoFundMe because she got pneumonia? Yeah. The woman who won the 1984 all-around Olympic gold medal, and the only people that seem to have their healthcare taken care of are Congress. Now, I think they're subsidized 70% or something.
Hey, that's another health tax. Is Americans pay for our senators? So 535 people, 36 with the president. So we actually also, the people who are saying we don't have choice, we want our freedom, we don't want to increase our tax, they already pay for the federal employee health benefits program that federal employees are on. That's about 9,000 full-timers and then thousands and thousands of contractors as well. And so that's another health tax.
Yeah, I want to see Mitch McConnell need a GoFundMe. I want to see how that feels to ask your friends and family.
Yeah, and the exciting thing now, though, you mentioned Mary Lou Retton, so I'll just kind of pull on that thread a little bit. Is there are athletes right now in the Olympic Village? The Olympics end tomorrow. There are athletes, track stars, rugby players, medal-winning elite athletes walking around the Olympic Village saying, "Oh my gosh, I had a dental appointment. I just took advantage of a dental appointment. I'm going to get a pap smear next week. They're
all getting
a taxpayer finance care."
Taxpayer finance care and we did the same. We travel to other countries and we have people tell us, "Oh, go to the pharmacy and pick up some of these things for me." When my wife had Lyme disease, the one medicine she needed here was $900 a pill. We ended up buying it from India. It was the same pill for like $22 for like a dozen of them.
Right. And the reason is the government there buys in bulk, and National Improved Medicare for All will allow the United States government to buy medicines in bulk. So when you go to Costco, Sam's Club, or wherever you shop in Nashville, whatever is going on down there, what do you got down there for like?
We have a new Costco in town. Yeah.
Okay. So you rock up to the Costco and you want to buy 300 rolls of toilet paper because now you have a baby, or you want to buy 1,900 boxes of diapers because now you have a baby. You do that because you want your cost to come down. So right now, the way in which CVS, Walgreens, all of these pharmacies are set up, it's all retail, peer-to-peer, deal making. Not even Mark Cuban can crack this nut. And so the government, under National Improved Medicare for All, will be buying medicines in bulk that will remove the patent and competition, that will lower costs for everyone. It's Coca-Cola 101. I'm not endorsing Coca-Cola. It's not a healthy drink, but it's Econ 101. If you widen the risk pool in healthcare, if you widen your consumer base, you get the prices down. That's why Coca-Cola's bottles are $1 a piece around the world still, because they've expanded the market and it lowers costs. That is freshman high school economics. Right. And the reason we don't do that in healthcare in the United States is because shareholders, senior management, C-suites, they love those profits, because when they deny us care for healthcare, when you're paying in your premiums, when you're paying your deductibles, and then they deny you care, or you delay care because you can't afford it, they take all of that money, they roll it into other portfolios that have nothing to do with healthcare, energy, you name it. They roll it into other investment portfolios, and then they make bank. That's the commercial health insurance industry model. They're taking money, and that's another argument for the most fiscally conservative persons in our country, is that even if you think your commercial health insurance plan is a good one, they're still robbing you and scamming you and hustling you as well. And that people don't like that, even if it doesn't matter if you're conservative or if you're, where you are on the political spectrum. So think of that. If you go to a 7-Eleven or a Circle K, whatever, down south, and you buy a candy bar, and after you buy the candy bar, which is your premium, they take it back across the counter, take a bite out of it, and give you about 25% of it, that candy bar. I mean, most Americans wouldn't really be happy with that. But that's what's happening in commercial health insurance. We are paying for a product or service, and we're not getting it. And because it's been the industry for so long, Americans have kind of been duped. It's like the group think. It's kind of like the second guess. Like, I guess this is the only way to do it. But really, they're being hustled, which is very surprising for Americans, because they like to think they're really consumer savvy. They like to think, we have choice. We like to shop competitively. We like to shop for the best deal. We have a lot of competition. But in commercial health insurance in the ACA, they don't have choice. They don't have any choice at all. It depends on where you are geographically.
And they don't have the choice to leave a job they might not like. And
you might, it's economically for fiscally conservative people, and also just progressive people. It's economically unsound and unhealthy to keep a person in a job when they're ready to excel out of that job because of commercial health insurance, because it's employer-sponsored health insurance. That that stagnates growth, that stagnates and stunts competition, that also breaks the will of some people. Is that I know people who've gotten married for health and commercial health insurance. I know people who've gotten divorced for health insurance reasons. I know people who have left their own businesses because they would have bankrupted their partner because their wife got, was in a catastrophic injury situation. So I've seen it all in the last 30 years, and it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking.
And I think when you talk to people on a one-to-one level, they get it. But I think we still live in this tribal time where if I explain this problem to the wrong person, they might just say, well, then why are we giving billions to Ukraine? And if I explain this problem to someone else, they might say, Canada's got no better. So how do we get on the same page, and how do we educate everybody how to fight this problem?
Perpetual warfare is probably the perpetual warfare economy, which we are the number one exporter of. 60 to 65% of munitions are made by what we call the Beltway bandits, on the East Coast. And so I always try to, when people ask me about healthcare and how the Senate Bill 1655, National Improved Medicare for All, is financed, I always try to meet them where they are. And so I think taking away the combative kind of competition sport dialogue out of healthcare is really just how I approach it. And so if you're a parent with a sick child, I try and make the case for single payer reform by encouraging them that they will have lifelong access to healthcare for this chronic illness. If I'm at a cocktail party and I'm brushing shoulders with a state senator, I kind of make the case for the fiscal rewards, which is if we stop paying into commercial health insurance and supporting this denial of care, harm for profit business model, imagine how much money is going to be freed up for actual health care, and imagine how much healthier the electorate will be. And we haven't even touched on persons with disabilities. Tethering health insurance, commercial health insurance to employment is so antiquated. It started in the 1850s when people were, laying train lines and working. They had so many industrial injuries, and people were losing arms. They were building the Brooklyn Bridge. So industry leaders started to say, hey, we need universal healthcare here, because my guys are dying out there. They're doing high risk work, and we need to start talking about this. Then in 1920, the US senators talked about it again. We really need universal health care if we're going to build up our industrial strength, because my guys are getting injured out there, and when they're disabled, we need to support them. So that's actually how it was. It's been talked about it's not a new radical notion. It's been talked about in the United States of America for almost 200 years. And that's why S 1655 includes sexual and reproductive health and abortion care as well, because it's folded into lifelong health maintenance. But these concepts aren't, like Dave, on your cast and the way in which you engage so healthfully with your viewers and readers, you're always asked, what do you think? What's your perspective? How are you feeling about this? And I really admire that, because then you can meet people where they are instead of kind of getting distracted by other issues and kind of pulled away by other issues, because I think Americans tend to put everything in the blender at once. But
yeah, we're totally misguided with so many cultural issues that my sister let it slip that she thought I was far left, and I don't think she knows what that means. But I was like, how is this like an issue that is considered far left?
Right.
Why is this even on a left-right spectrum here? We should be slapping in a bald eagle on top of our pharmacy products and make this a big America First issue.
Yeah, that's what's funny about America, or what I call, the United States of America, is that there are lightning in a bottle progressive moments in our country, but we're very, very regressive, extremely regressive on so many policies. And that's because of that private sector, the demonization of government, the demonization of civic engagement, the demonization of public monies. But when you talk to somebody like your sister, she might be suggesting that money is going to be squandered if universal health care was implemented. She might be thinking, well, it's my responsibility. I'm responsible for my family. You be responsible for yours. We'll deal with it in our way. You deal with it in yours. The reason that argument doesn't work is because when I get hurt and can't pay my bills, her family is affected fiscally. Her premiums go up. So the more people who can't afford healthcare and the sicker that they get, eventually they teeter into charity, they live on the streets, they become, there's a byproduct that happens. And other parts of society become responsible fiscally for those populations. And so there's a roundabout backdoor argument with people who are asking that question. You take care of your family, I'll take care of my own. Our healthcare is great. We have no problems. We're all healthy. We're all healthy. We have the gold standard plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna or United or Molina, whoever. And they just think, usually those people haven't had a catastrophic injury, chronic illness, disability, or just an accident. And we're all like, as we talk positively about the need for universal health care as we ramp up to this next election, is I try to flip the conversation on its head, which is to say, everybody, everyone listening now, and everybody is vulnerable to chance, circumstance, and luck. And it is true that some of my alcoholic and addicted friends will live to be 105. It is true. And it is true that I lost a dear friend when she was 50, who is a vegan, cycling, stunt woman, dancer, choreographer, who never used chemicals or abused substances. That is true about life. But we are all vulnerable to chance, circumstance, and luck. And you cannot project when you're going to need healthcare. And the entire commercial health insurance industry business model is actually based on projecting what people will need. And it's just not possible. And that's why they cut and purge and augment premiums, because they're playing with people's lives. They're not playing with Snickers bars. They're not playing with widgets. They're playing with people's lives. And so we just saw that with United Health Group when the cyber attack happened with Optum in the spring. They just started purging, dumping, cutting services immediately, because it's just
that happened while we were giving birth.
Yeah.
They had to do everything by hand. It was
think about that risk. And nobody's been indicted. Nobody's been convicted, incarcerated for that, all of that fallout. And United, that is a great example of negligence. The Department of Justice was already investigating them for white collar crime, for insider trading, for intimidation, for antitrust violations. But indicting and convicting and incarcerating the persons at United Health Group who actually have committed those crimes, that's a whole nother show. It most likely won't happen. And they're still supporting candidates and congressional members and people who are running for office. But that's the positive way to kind of speak to people who say, well, gosh, I don't want my taxes to go up. Well, you're already paying for about 17 programs already on top of your premiums. Or if they say, it's our choice, it's our family, we don't have any problems, we're healthy. Just, it's going to come to their door sooner or later. And
sorry, keep going. We last Thursday, we had our first election here in Nashville, and there was no information in the ballot info that they gave us for any of the candidates, which we were surprised by, because in California, we would get a blurb on everybody and what they stood for. So my wife takes it really seriously. She did a lot of her homework and found out who to be voting for. If people do want to support this bill, is there a master list somewhere of which candidates in people's local elections are for Medicare for All?
That is a fantastic question. There is a company that was born out of, I believe, University of Chicago a few years ago. It's called Ballotopedia. And you can go to Ballotopedia, and not just for healthcare policy, but for every policy that you're concerned about as citizens and residents of the United States. So it's Ballotopedia. And you go there and you can look at state Supreme Court justices, regional leaders, state leaders, municipal leaders, all the way down to the school board, I think, in your district. So you just plug in your zip code or whatever, and it's very current. They keep it up to date. It's very current. So that's an excellent tool. As far as holding candidates to account on enacting universal health care, the more people who come out publicly and don't feel a sense of shame, because medical care and healthcare is so private that a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about it. But the more people who share their experience of not being able to afford care, the more people who share their experience with the press, with the media, with grassroots organizations saying, we cannot afford this and this is how it's harming us, the better. So people can go on the public record with their stories. And then there's an array of other organizations that list candidates who are supporting S1655, which is National Improved Medicare for All. So it depends on your state. And some states are also advocating for statewide single payer: California, Minnesota, Washington, Oregon, Vermont. I think New Mexico has something going now. So there are lots of citizens who are trying to get statewide single payer. And then there's the national bill, which is S1655. But Ballotopedia is a great place to start. And then medical residents across the country are unionizing and advocating for, in record numbers, they're unionizing at hospitals, residents and interns, and advocating for universal health care. Nurses across the country, just look up your nurses association in your state, and National Nurses United. They're advocating for single payer national health program. Physicians for National Health Program, Healthcare for All chapters around the United States. So there's so much movement right now across red, purple, and blue states, pink, green, all of it.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is I wouldn't want to ever tell anyone how to vote. I just want people to be as educated as possible, and I just don't think we're there. But I hope conversations like this can at least get the ball rolling for us. So I'd love it if you'd ever come back before the election or afterwards to keep talking, because this was very valuable info.
I'd love to talk more about it in more detail and give people more tools for kind of getting active, no matter what their situation is. If they're a disabled person, if they're an athlete, if they're a business owner, entrepreneur, contractor, consultant, an Oscar award-winning actor. It doesn't matter who you are. Illness, injury, disability, and death do not discriminate. And we need to depoliticize healthcare. We need to depoliticize healthcare in the United States. So that's the aim.
I'm on board with that. Well, thanks again. I'll post a link in the description to where people can reach out. What's the best way for people, anything we can promote of yours today?
Well, sure. People can reach me at Some People Everybody. It's Some People Everybody, kind of like the body, .com. They can contact me through that site. They can find me on Insta. Just go down the Google me, and you can reach out anytime. And people contact me daily still, saying, what can I do? My son was just diagnosed with diabetes. What can I do? I want to get active as a nurse in the single payer reform movement. So you can DM me, email me, and I usually get back to people in about 3 days.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.